I've made 2 prior videos on this subject. I want to follow up on some more information about weapons of mass destruction. The 2 prior videos that pertain to EOD and of nuclear devices. In this video I want to talk a little bit about health physics. Radiation biology is something I'm not an expert on. I know what the state of the technology and biological understanding we had when I started and what it is now. When I started working in health physics and radiation control, which is as a radiation control officer in the military or at the Department of Energy, you control the activities in a nuclear power plant, on a submarine or aircraft carrier, a waste facility operated by DOE or the military, and transportation. He was responsible for security, health physics, all the activities that are associated with your operations too, either the operation of a power plant, a waste facility, or transportation. And also be related to metrology, radiation instrumentation, and calibration. Metrology is a science that weights and measures. Some of that's real important. The metrology is either used in nuclear medicine, which give you your meters that are used to calculate the appropriate dose, dose rate, and dose for different radiation treatments. And I'm not an oncologist, but or a nuclear medicine doctor, but those are fields, if you're interested in radiation, that you could assist in a crisis where a dirty bomb or a nuclear weapon was detonated on American soil or on the soil of your country, wherever you came from, to assist in the mass casualty response to a nuclear incident. As a doctor with experience in physics or in health physics and nuclear medicine, radiology, or oncology, you could provide a lot of technical guidance to emergency responders, CBRN people, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear incident response teams. You could provide expert guidance, and you could work with them and train with them. There are CERT teams and things like that that work in the United States that help prepare for nuclear incidents and other types of mass casualties and things. So what I would say, it's more than just physics. Radiation, obviously the basic understanding comes from physics, back with people like Marion, Pierre Curie, Rankin. You see Rankin on the inside of the old William Rankin, I think his name was. It's on the inside of little dosimeters, which look like a little pen light flashlight and carry around your pocket in the old days, and it will measure your exposure. Right? Some people don't know what exposure is. Exposure is kind of like if somebody shined a flashlight at you, that's exposure. And then contamination is the other thing that can happen to you, and that's kind of like a pile of a cow patty. If you step on it and it gets all over your shoe, that's something you can feel, touch, see, and you know it's on your shoe, right? That's contamination. You can get it anywhere on your body or on some equipment or on a facility or something. Any of that is contamination. Exposure is just kind of having the light bulb shined at you and you're kind of in a radioactive field that you can't see. You might you won't smell much or anything like that from your exposure, but it's happening to you. Now there's a different kind of exposure in a power plant normally than in a nuclear explosion. In a nuclear explosion, if you're close enough, you could get maybe 400 rads an hour or something like that. It depends on how close you are. You know, if you're too close, you're going to get vaporized, right? Or you're just going to get cooked or whatever, and you'll die pretty quick. And further out, you could get a higher exposure, and there's different effects, right? You might think you don't know anything about radiation exposure from a nuclear blast, but you probably do. What you have to do is connect the dots to things that you do understand, and then you'll gain insights to things you didn't think you understood. It's radiation exposure is like what? You have to think. It's better for you to figure out for yourself, and give you a few seconds. I tell you that. You could stop the video if you want to and come back right now, and I tell you, you understand probably a little bit about cancer because you had a grandparent or somebody older in your family, or even yourself or somebody else who got cancer, right? And what do they do when you get cancer? They often give you some nuclear medicine, right? Some kind of radiation treatment, chemos and things like that. Sometimes you're swallowing something that's radioactive, and sometimes they're cooking you in the field, right? And you don't always know how that works. Some of you do, but what does radiation do? Well, sometimes to figure out how it works, you want to look at the effects, right? Or the side effects, right? Well, you know that it kills the cancer, hopefully, right? And sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? But generally it kills the cancer, and then it kills something else too, right? And people know it. They don't really think of it as killing it sometimes, but it kills your hair is the thing that's easiest to see. Is there women who shave their head is what people think, but it's also their hair falls out, right? And it doesn't look so good with the little with a little bit of like gray hair sticking out of your head, so they just go ahead and shave the rest of it. But hair falls out, and so if it's killing the tumor and it's killing the hair, you have to resort to your knowledge of biology, and give you another chance to stop the tape and think about that, and because you want to compare those two types of cells, or whatever you want to say. Is the cancer cell is similar to the hair cell in what way? A way is explained in a basic radiation control officer's course, or local radiological protection officer's course, or radiological protection officer's course. They start at the bottom with LRPOs, and it's RPOs and RCOs. RCOs work at major commands usually, or they're in charge of the control of something like a submarine, like in charge of the reactor. The reactor officer, he's the radiation control officer. Other officers on the submarine with engineering qualifications, which is all of them, should have radiation control training as well. Health physics, and there'll be somebody with medical training, someone with chemical engineering training, electrical engineering training. They all can qualify in the health physics training they need, the health physics and radiation biology and radiation control, so they can assist in a disaster. We haven't had one of those in the nuclear navy. They're on aircraft carriers and submarines, the power plants, the nuclear power plants. They call the submarines power boats, and they just kind of don't talk about it, right? But we haven't had an incident ever, and we use pressure water reactors. Ours are solid, you know. The Russians have had the Widowmaker, K-19, the Widowmaker, and you can go watch that movie. It's a good movie to show you how bad it could be if everything goes wrong. And that movie, that boat probably had some kind of hex on it or something, because everything went wrong from the time they christened it to the time they set sail to go test missiles. And then they had a meltdown. and I had to get out of the boat and life rafts or something. And you can watch it. It's a pretty horrible movie, and you can see what the exposure causes. Well, let's get back to how a tumor is similar to your hair. If you figured it out, your hair is dividing, right? And I'm not a biology guy, but it's like that. You have meiosis and mitosis and all that. That'd be the area I'd go look something up right now if I didn't know biology. And I recommend you look things up, because in high school they teach you everything. And I don't teach high school. So I tell people that one of their most valuable tools on a computer is a search box. You can put an image of a Google search box up there on your monitor if you teach college and you want to teach people how to look for things. Start them with that when they're a freshman, and then teach them the other resources as you go along through the course. I know you have to take an English class or some kind of class that you do a little research, and research is about searching for resources and about exploiting those resources to prove hypotheses, right? And that's more than one, right? Because you're going to write one paper, and it becomes many papers, right? Yeah, I understand there's a hypothesis you have to start with in English 101 or whatever it is, 1A or whatever they call it in your school. What I would tell you is those cells divide in your hair, and it kills those cells when you radiate somebody, and that's why their hair falls out. And there's other cells in your body, like your germ cells for men and your eggs for women, the ova, I guess they call them. And like I say, I'm not a biologist. I do know that those cells is dividing, right? And there is a reason why some women choose not to work in nuclear power, not to want to join the nuclear navy, not to want to be Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs work with nuclear power, nuclear weapons, nuclear security, and they could be involved in a nuclear incident where they are exposed in a crisis. And that doesn't have to be on American soil or an American ship, as you might well understand. So some people, they ought not to have their eggs cooked, because why? Women have a certain number of eggs at birth, and they never get any more. They lose a little bit each time they menstruate, right? And if you kill those eggs or mutate those eggs, you'll never get any more with the current state of biotechnology, right? Maybe someday they'll be able to synthesize some new eggs for you, but not right now. You have to freeze them these days. When I started, you couldn't freeze those things and put them back in. I mean, probably you could have, but nobody quite understood how to do that, right? So now they understand there's more opportunities for women who don't mind freezing their eggs. There's some potential risks. I would recommend that the Department of Defense enact a program so women could do that at their option, at the expense of the Department of Defense, which would encourage women who are interested in nuclear security, nuclear weapons, and yeah, and when I say nuclear weapons, I don't mean sitting in a shielded room and being a missileer. There's plenty of women who do that. I mean the guy who goes and does nuclear weapons maintenance and security. And that involves sometimes touching that stuff and getting close to it. And those people go to the Defense Nuclear Weapons School, which is in Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Obviously, they do teach it in other places, but they don't mention that through open source, right? They teach it at CIA and they teach it at other places, right? And because counterintelligence people need to go there and select people for the training. Well, they need to go other places, select people for the training, and make sure that people are suitable before they graduate, before they go out and touch that nuclear material, work in places like Pantex, the place where they build the bomb, and other places. So that's like counterintelligence, they learn a little bit about everything. And some people specialize in certain career fields, but you have to be real smart in counterintelligence, because you have to know what everybody else's job is, and then you have to help select people and make sure people are suitable, as well as make sure they qualify make sure the standards are met, and make sure they're not spying and leaking secrets, what we call diarrhea mouth, right? That's loose lips sink ships, right? So you don't want all that crap coming out of their mouth. I wear the brown shirt and mention that, right? That's the Brownwater Navy out there. Is not just the Mekong Delta. The Brownwater Navy sometimes is that counterintelligence effort from the SEAL teams and counterintelligence officers and Marines to protect our secrets, including nuclear secrets. And I call that the Brownwater Navy myself sometimes. It's maybe not something you've heard of, but that's what it is. And but what I would say is there's a lot of other opportunities, right? As you can see that the cells in your sperm, which are germ cells, right, they rapidly divide as well. And the eggs and germs. But the thing is about a man, he's a little different biologically than a woman. I know people will say we're equals, we're equals under the law, and that's about as far as it goes when it comes to biology and nuclear materials and weapons and ionizing radiation. Your germ cells as a man will be destroyed with a high dose of radiation. To cause permanent sterility, you'd need over 350 rads, which is radiation absorbed dose, which is a very high dose, which you would get from a nuclear weapon, or possibly being too close to a nuclear meltdown. I'm not sure how you could get that in a power plant, but you might die before you went sterile, right? You become permanently sterile at 350, 400, 450 rads, but you're going to die probably before that or right after that. If you were going to get temporary sterile, it's even a much lower doses, what I would call temporary sterility. I would just abstain. Abstinence is a good policy for someone who's been exposed. Because why? There's three types of effects. One is somatic, and soma is your body. They teach some new vocabulary, or they use the vocabulary you learned when you prepared for the SAT in college to get into college. They start using those words that they never used in high school, but you had to memorize for the SAT in college, and they teach you how to search for things using resources like Google search and some other resources in the library to find the right journal article or the right reference for your papers, your hypothesis in some class, right? Your theses. But yeah, I would say that that you're going to become you have the somatic effects, and you have tetragenic effects, and you have genetic effects. And the way I understand it is, soma is your body, and if you have a genetic effect, those are effects that affect a fetus, right? And a baby when it's born. It's born being exposed while it's in the womb, or during spermiogenesis, when a sperm meets an egg cell and they start dividing. There are two things that can happen. The fetus can be deformed, mutated some way. The development of the fetus becomes there's a mutation in that soma. When it comes out and becomes a soma, a somatic, then it's got some problems, right? Who knows what kind of problems it's going to have. It can be kind of random where that radiation hits that DNA while it's, or that fetus while it's developing and creating you know, the DNA would take some hits too, right? And the DNA is, I guess, the tetragenic effects. It's the offspring of that fetus would also have some problems, right? So you think it's a developmental problem, but it's also a problem that affects the offspring in a way that is affecting the genetic offspring of that fetus and that fetus's offspring. So it affects, what do we call it? There's offspring and progeny, right? So it's going to go all the way down into, into that branch of the tree in your family tree. Now, you would think that's irreversible, right? But in my mind, it is not irreversible. Not with the current state of technology. We have, as you may know if you study biology at all, or most kids in high school go to the top schools in the Ivy League, or a top school like Georgia Tech, University of Texas at Austin, Michigan, or Berkeley. They definitely had a biology course, a physics course, and a chemistry course to get into a STEM related or an engineering related educational major. So you know about CRISPR, and probably even if you had a good science class and it wasn't biology, you still learned about CRISPR. As the professor or the teacher or the lecturer or somebody mentioned it. And you had to look it up to figure out what he's talking about because you knew how to use a search box. And CRISPR is about gene editing. So if you have something that has some kind of genetic tetragenic effects from a exposure to radiation during a pregnancy, that could be from working in the power plant or a submarine or an aircraft carrier where there's an accident, or in a waste facility, or after exposure to a nuclear weapon that was detonated, or a dirty bomb, or some type of poisoning, then you had a baby. You may be able to do some gene editing and correct some of those mutations in the genome there, in the DNA strands, right? So you go in and see what's wrong and see what you can fix, right? Now that's like a brave new world to some people. They're doing it in China. Apparently they've cured some diseases and had some babies, right? And that is alarming to some ethicists. There are people who are exposed to radiation all the time, and they know they don't agree with other people when it comes to moral issues sometimes, and the moral issues and our tissues, right? There's people who's worried about abortion, and when they walk into a power plant and they're a woman and they know their baby's going to get cooked if something happens, some of them still walking in and out of those places, or they get pregnant and don't know, and they're going to have an abortion, most of them. That's a decision they'll have to make, but most of them don't want a baby that's been cooked by gamma rays or something like that, or they swallow some alpha accidentally when there's a bunch of dust in the air. They don't want a radiological baby. So most of them go for the abortions. That's something that people don't talk about as much. They understand, there's rape, incest, and then there's, some kind of chemical or radiological exposure. They don't usually consider that in the law, but most people, they make enough money working in the power plant, they'd get on the bus, train, or plane and get somewhere where they could have an abortion. And, there's people wouldn't talk about it. They don't talk about what they do at work, and they don't talk about their abortions either. But those are considerations if you're a woman and want to work in the field. It could help out a lot understanding CRISPR. If you're a biologist, a radiation biologist, you might want to examine that as a research interest, right? Because you'd need a knowledge of physics, atomic physics, and nuclear medicine, and a little health physics. You can get all that, and there's different ways to get it. You take the classes in college and try to double major in physics and biology, or something like that, sure. And go to medical school. Harvard Medical School would be great, right? Columbia is just as good almost. Not quite. But, or UPenn. UPenn is a great school, right? University of Pennsylvania, not the Penn State Nittany Lions. They're Ivy League as well, for those of you who don't know. That's where Donald Trump went. But what I would say is there's great opportunities for research in CRISPR. You could maybe solve some of those problems with the developing fetus, or with a fetus that's turned into a baby and been birthed. So you could, even if you can't solve that baby, you could solve that baby's offspring, right? There's a problem there that is gonna ripple through the Ancestry.com DNA for years and years if you don't fix it. And CRISPR maybe is a potential way to solve some problems that, you know, that people would otherwise just get an abortion, you know. And if you're somebody who believes strongly in anti-abortion things, and you don't like CRISPR, but you know, would you rather have, it's a moral, ethical quandary, would you rather have an abortion or edit some genes, right, and potentially save the baby, and the offspring would be, you know, potentially better off. So that's something for the philosophy department at the medical school. They have those ethics classes in the law school, and especially in schools like the Catholic University of America, where they teach canon law. That would be something that would be real important, and also where they teach theology and things like that. You might want to consider that at the Harvard Divinity School. There's a little something for everybody if you pay attention. I would say that you don't necessarily have to go to medical school to help, and you don't have to get a double major in physics and biology. It would help to have a physics background. You can get the biology and the nuclear medicine and the health physics from Georgia Tech. I worked for a health physicist for a while. I was a security officer, and I ran a program that he wasn't completely aware of, and sometimes that's the case in facilities like waste facilities and metrology or calibration facilities. They have a facility where deadly force is authorized, and they have Navy SEALs working around those places sometimes to protect the facilities, and sometimes they put somebody in there to make sure that everything is, you know, up to SOP, right? Standard operating procedure. Problem is, in the laboratory you have chemicals, you have cylinders as well, nitrogen cylinders and radiological gas cylinders, right, that are in a calibration facility. You have to calibrate instruments that detect ionizing radiation in liquid, solid, or gas forms, right? And some of the liquid that you'll use is liquid scintillation chambers and stuff that count light photons that are emitted from cocktails of swabs that you might take of some type of device that may be leaking. You wipe cotton swabs all over it, throw them in a cocktail in a little vial, put them in a tray, run them through the dark chamber. The cocktail and the radiation react and create light photons instead of radiation. And then they have a photomultiplier tube that counts the light photons and converts that into a dose rate or something like that. Anyways, there's different applications of liquid scintillation. That's basically how it works, right? So that's kind of a physics thing, and you need a little physics knowledge. But if you have a threat inside your laboratory and you need to use deadly force, it's not a good idea to start firing off your MP5 or MP4 or whatever, your submachine gun, or your 357 or your 9mm or whatever you're carrying in there, because why? Because you might hit one of them cylinders, and do you know what happens when one of them cylinders falls down and the cap comes off and all that? They'll fly around the room. They're usually chained up, right? You put a chain around them, you put them on something, and you be kind of careful when you're handling those things. They will, apparently, according to the physics department, you can study that during your physics class and see what the potential kind of thrust they can develop from a ruptured tank. And that's the part of physics you'd want to study, is how where is it going to fly? You could do a little simulation and a couple different simulations and figure out what's going to happen to that cylinder if you shoot it, right? And you got a bullet and you know the initial velocity and where it hits the tank, and then you could calculate kind of how it penetrates it and what happens to the tank, right? And there's chemicals too. If you punctured something, you might get a gas in the laboratory. And so deadly force is authorized, but you're probably not going to want to use your 357 or your 9mm or 45 ACP. Those are 357's usually the government people, not the military. That's like the federal cops, the energy cops. It is to carry something reliable and strong, right? It's all prime numbers. Anyways, they were ready to fire that primer. And anyways, yeah, 3 by 19 is 57 too, lady. 3 is C, the third letter of the alphabet. 19 is S. So it's a combat swimmer. It's a Navy SEAL. And 57 is that factor. 5 and 7 is 12 is an L, which is L clearance. And L is sometimes that atomic bomb security, right? So L is also AB, which is 1, 2. It's LAB for lab, but it's that what? 3, 19, 57 goes to 12, right? 12 and 9, you get the 21. You get the undercover from that. 21 is U. 2 and 1 is 3. You get UC as undercover. UC Berkeley is where it started, ladies and gentlemen. Lawrence Livermore, he created those accelerators or whatever, the centrifuges and stuff, to spin out all that stuff into weapons grade. They did. Up in Chicago, they built the reactors, and out in Berkeley, they figured out how to spin it up and enrich it, I guess. You can credit Lawrence Livermore with, I think he won a Nobel or something. He was pretty bright. They've got a nice little museum for the kids up there. There's things for exhibits for adults too, but you can look at what he created, little like old, like the old centrifuges and stuff, or whatever, accelerators or whatever we call them. And anyways, there's a fair amount of things that a SEAL can do in a laboratory, but you have to understand what's going on in the laboratory, right? So you need some health physics and radiation biology, and some security training, and also some knowledge of what? SEAL teams, they train people in electronics and engineering and physics, so they can go help in security. And that's what I tell you, if you want to go and be NNSA, security, National Nuclear Security Administration, they do more than just secure power plants and nuclear weapons and waste facilities. They also involve in non-proliferation, and you'd probably, and that's a security issue, right? There's nuclear weapons. We find some nuclear material overseas. We got to get the Navy SEAL team to go recover them, but they need people to figure out how to get it in and out of there, and safely and securely, right? So you find some CIA and the FBI find a little bit of radiation out there. Nuclear material is what they call it, not radiation. The nuclear material is something that can be used as a source of radiation. So they want to recover that. They bring in the SEAL team. They put it in an armored vehicle with a lot of security around it and get it to an airport out of that country back to somewhere safe. And that's called a recovery mission, or M, which not be confused with the SEAL radio men. But sometimes it's in a country that we have permission to fly in and out of there and do those kind of things, and sometimes it's not. Ukraine, we probably wouldn't have a problem getting in and out of there. Some of those Eastern European countries don't want us in there, and there's Russians in there, and they don't want us there, so we have to do what we do. It's a clandestine kind of thing. It's a covert operation. Generally, when you fly over a country, you need overflight permissions, which the embassy in that country or an embassy that can communicate with that country will get you. In a country like Iran, where they took our embassy, we don't usually get a lot of overflight permission for military aircraft. And airliners, I guess, sometimes would fly over those countries if they talk to the Iranians. We don't usually fly American airliners that way. It's not as safe, right? So when you have to go, you have to do a little covert op, fly in on a jet or something somehow. But we don't recover a lot of uranium in Iran. But in Eastern Europe, we might fly in some jet under false pretenses, and then we pop it out of there. And we can fly a stealth fighter in and out of there as well. When cover of darkness, they're not going to see the stealth orbiting up there or cruising out there. And if there's a problem, we can get the support we need to keep that jet aircraft aloft. So there's a purpose to have Gulf streams and citations, which are popular jets for those types of missions. A citation doesn't seat as many people. It's not as big a blip on the radar screen. It's still going to show up, but it's a bunch of bankers and people talk business on the aircraft, and they don't mind as much. Or there's a way to chatter and let them know it's just about making money. It's about helping your country, things like that. And we can do things to grease the skids. That's what the CIA do to get people in and out of there, is a little bit of money, because you know what a gram of uranium is worth, highly enriched, or plutonium or something. A lot of money. And 5,000 of them and you got a nuclear weapon. 5,000 grams. That's about what you need. And 5,000 grams is a lot of money's worth of uranium, but you know, how much is New York worth? How much is the New York, New Jersey, Newark metropolitan statistical area of 20 million people worth? An airburst, you usually got to get it up in a plane, but if you take it to the top of a skyscraper, it's up there pretty high in the World Trade Center. I don't know if you get it that high. You can get it up into a soft target in New York. It's almost as high as the Empire State Building, you know, 1,000 feet up or whatever. That's maybe 500, 600 feet up. It's going to increase the devastation of Manhattan or wherever. It might not hit the old NNSA, but there's going to be fallout. There's going to be it's like a dirty bomb in some respects. They'll recover like Hiroshima and Nagasaki did, but a lot of people get killed, and a lot of destruction, and a lot of fallout or something. But yeah, so the SEAL teams are used to recover those things, and they got to get in there like quick. You can't have a big footprint while the CIA and the FBI are walking around trying to do its thing. Otherwise, they think that somebody's in there to kill them, and they won't bring the material you need to recover. So there's less of they put those SEALs in some kind of stealth bomber and drop them out, and they'll pop on top of a rooftop or out in a field somewhere, getting some cars that the CIA got from agents, right? For agents, and the agents would build them to be more reliable, more secure, better armor plating or bulletproof or something. That's why you was wondering why those Russians got bulletproof cars or something, or why we get bulletproof cars sometimes for the spies. And that's why, because you need bulletproof, and you need those tires you can shoot that you know, the what they call the nail guard tires or whatever. There's a reason for those tires. It's for covert action, right? And that's covert action that the SEALs and the CIA are involved in. You got to have an armored car to put the material in, because once you leave the sting, someone's going to try to steal it. It's just like the drug dealers in Florida. If you're DEA or something, you understand that. These people will buy a kilo of cocaine and then somebody else will try to steal it from me. That's why they all carry guns, and 357s ain't good enough. They need AKs and SKSs and all that shit to hold on to their drugs, because they got to get it from where? From Miami or from wherever they buy it back to their trap. Well, it's a trap. The trap is a trap house where they cook cookies, and the cookie is basically at the bottom of a stock pot. It's about 12 to 16 inches in diameter, maybe. It's a spaghetti pot, and they cook it in there, and they make crack cocaine. Crack cocaine a lot more valuable than a kilo of cocaine, because a kilo will run you $3,500 in the Dominican Republic. It'll run you $20,000 in Miami, and up here in Fort Pierce, $30,000. But if you cook it into crack, it's worth way more, at least $70,000. Even if you probably more than that. I don't cook cookies, but a cookie's $600 to $1,200. They break it up into little cracks, and each little crack rock is 25, 30, 50 rocks. Sometimes it's a big one. That lasts for 5 minutes for some people, and people smoke that all day. That cookie's worth a lot of money. You could do the measurements of a crack rock and compare it to their cookie and see how many crack rocks you get. That's your geometry for the day if you want to specialize. Anyways, if you don't know the exact dimensions of that spaghetti pot, go down to one of those kitchen stores or look online. But anyways, a crack cookie's worth a lot. Powder, not as much. Maybe the powder's worth $70,000. They break it down into grams, right? What's a gram cost? If you're in prison and you want to get a gram, it's going to cost you $70, and that's called green money. Green money is cash. It's not canteen, cigarettes, I suck your dick. They want money for drugs in prison usually. You can either give them the money in the prison, which is sometimes better, or you can give it to them on the street and they give it to their baby mama or something like that. It's about $70 to get a gram of powder. If it's a crack rock, it's like probably expensive, but $50 to get it into the prison, then they make 20, and the guy sells it to them for 30. The smuggler, like a guard or somebody carrying it in for you. As people slam it up their ass, they get a good deal, I guess. They buy it somewhere in the hood, they slam it up some guy's ass, and he carries it in. He gets a bonus for carrying it in his ass. They carry big bricks of weed and big bricks of coke, and I don't know, they probably put a cell phone up their ass too. But that's what a crack rock would do for you, right? There's a lot of money involved. You figure out a cookie 600 and how many cookies you can make. You can watch one of those National Geographic episodes, search for it, it's probably on YouTube, on how to make crack and how to make crack cookies, and how much yield you get from 1 kilo. A kilo is 2.214 pounds, and you can look that up and confirm it. It's about right. So out of 2 pounds, it starts out at 30,000. You can make 70 up over 100 for crack, right? 70 for powder and up over 100. And if you're smuggling it into a prison every day with a little bindle here and a bindle there, it's quite a bit of money you can make as a jail guard. If you guys interested, you always go be prison guards. Hopefully you do the right thing and you'd be on the side of the law trying to stop that kind of activity. It's the activity having money and corruption in prison is, you say, well, drugs are okay, but you don't understand what they do to people for drugs in a prison. They rape people, stab people, they stab guards, they shoot shit weapons at people that infect people. Go look at the story of Barry Sadler. He went to Vietnam, stepped on a punji stick, and a punji stick was a man trap. There was a hole in the ground with sticks coming up that were sharpened. They used to put crap on the punji sticks to create an infection. While he was sitting in his hospital bed, he wrote a song called The Ballad of the Green Berets, and he was a sergeant in the Green Berets. And he got a Purple Heart and a #1 hit single. And he sung the song and took it to the #1 on the charts in the 1960s. Everything he learned from that, they applied elsewhere, though. There were people who said, man, I build my own punji stick, you know, and they build them in prison, they build them in the hood, and you can get an infection and lose your leg or your arm or something because of what somebody stabs you with. They don't just make shanks and stab you in prison. So if you're a good scientist, you want to be a prosecutor or sit on a parole board, you could apply your science skills to solving some crimes that, you know, people like that, after they kill somebody, infect somebody like that, get somebody's leg cut off, they need to have the appropriate sentence, and that means applying what they did to get additional charges. And somebody who's going to be a warden, if you're studying law and you want to run a prison or a prison system or sit on a parole board, you need to know when to refer things to a crime lab, and that'd be when you need biological evidence to support your hypothesis that somebody was poisoned and that's why they lost their leg with an infection. And you need to know how to collect that off the weapon in the wound with the doctor and with the people, sometimes the victim who's not really cooperative, right? So there's a lot of forensic psychology, there's a lot of criminal justice insight that you need to develop to do that job. But get back to this smuggle. You just get it out of the country. You need Navy SEALs out there. You need to get it on a plane, and the CIA has to pop pretty fast, and they might not be on site. You never know when they're going to be able to make a buy, and you have to get them there ASAP. And B-2 bombers or something like that. There's a reason to have the stealth and the fighters. The fighters provide escort to your jets and your cargo aircraft and things like that. That makes it possible to move those aircraft without having them shot down. There's things that can happen to an aircraft that don't look like, that can make it look like it was just an accident, right? So it's like engine failure. They can shoot something into the engine and make it look like, you know, there's a bird or something hit it, or bird strike or something like that. But really, it's a small missile or something. Shoot something small enough at it, and shoot a pellet in there that'll blow your engine up, right? This is like a BB, like a Daisy BB. It's going to blow up with the engine. You're not going to have much engine evidence, right? So there's room for people want to study that kind of stuff too. But at Georgia Tech, let's get back to that guy I worked with, the health physicist. He studied health physics at Georgia Tech in the video course program. I believe they still have a nuclear medicine and a health physics program. The nuclear medicine is geared towards nurses. They have in the power plants and nuclear programs is usually an industrial hygiene nurse. These are like OSHA nurses. This is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. In the Code of Federal Regulations, there's 10 CFR and 39 CFR. This is where you're going to find information, and I tell you those CFRs so you don't have to look through the whole code. This information somewhere in there, you'll have to search it, about health and radiation safety, right? So he's going to need to know a little bit of that information to be a radiation protection officer, a radiation control officer, or local radiological protection officer. You need to know what reference you have for your authority and your responsibility, right? And that's in the Code of Federal Regulations, right? Those are your safety references and things like that. And your licensing references. You have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that regulates your job as a power plant employee or a federal waste facility or something like that. And then you have the military authorities and stuff that monitor you. And it's different in different military commands. But the Navy, when they created NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration, they created the Navy Nuclear, it was a triple N, I think. The National Navy Nuclear Security Administration or some agency, something like that. And you can't find it on a website anymore. It was right after Hazel O'Leary, when Bill Richardson took over, I think. And it was one of the things I was involved in creating. Before that, obviously, they had Office of Counterintelligence and Security at the Department of Energy, but they did not have an agency or an administration within the DOE that was thoroughly devoted to security and non-proliferation. Non-proliferation is obviously an element of security when it comes to nuclear weapons and nuclear materials. We become a less stable world when more countries possess nuclear materials. Now, obviously, there are some responsible countries that could, and you could argue that it's not less stable, but it can create conflict. And then there are some countries that aren't responsible, and that definitely makes the world less stable, right? So it's good to have those energy cops to assist in non-proliferation and the security of materials we have or we discover somewhere out there in the black market. So there's a lot of opportunities to contribute to national security with a health physics and nuclear medicine industrial hygiene nursing degree, which is a kind of master's degree generally. To get a BSN in nursing from a good school and then get one from Georgia Tech is a good place to get that, especially if you want to work and catch a degree online. That's not a bad option. A physics or an engineering background or some kind of nursing background for the nursing degree. I'm pretty sure it's still available. I haven't looked at that website in a couple of years. You probably want to go search the website. There's a little search box at gtech.edu or something like that. So gt.edu, whatever it is. I think it's GTECH or something. Or you just use Google search to find the school's website. But there's a lot of opportunity in some of it. You could get into robotics. There's a computer science degree, online master of science in computer science at Georgia Tech. So you get a computer science degree and get that. And they offer courses in computer science for robotics. And that's open to electrical engineers, mathematicians, and computer scientists. So you could get any of those degrees with the 3.0 GPA. You take 2 of their required courses, and then you gain. You're admitted conditionally with the 3.0 and the right major, but with the 2 required courses, then you become an admit, and you don't need to submit SATs, GREs, GMATs, or any of that. You just need your transcripts from college and the right major and the right GPA. And that course is taught MOOC with evaluations done through, I think, Udacity. And MOOC is massively online open courseware. You may be familiar with that. That's like the edX kind of curriculums are taught in a similar way. And the cost is much less at Georgia Tech for those degrees. It's $7,500 for a master's. So if you live in a country and you can't get the visa and pay all that money for a degree, but you have an engineering or computer science background, that might be just what the doctor ordered. And I'm the doctor. It's just a career and educational advice. I'm not giving you medical advice. It could crash your brain if it's too difficult. But, and that would be a psychiatric problem. You might need to seek psychiatric care. But, yeah, it can be pretty difficult. But they have a robotics track, they have an AI machine learning, a data track, and some kind of operating systems, I think. That's what's available through it's called OMSCS. O is for online, MS for master science, and CS is computer science. And you have to take about 36 hours, and they have another track. It's not computer science, but it's a data analysis or something, which is like data science kind of background. And I think that's open to more tracks than just computer science, engineering, and math. That one got same kind of admissions requirements. 3.0 GPA, pass 2 classes, and you're in. The 2 classes are kind of the core classes, 2 of the cores, and you can select from among different classes, but be something like artificial intelligence and data structures or something like that. And the computer science one is similar, but they're different classes usually. Anyways, that's a little background. I could go on, but I don't want to bore you too much. I've hit the search box and kind of, if you're new in college, you're just getting started. I know it's December, and some of you is trying to think about selecting a major by the end of your first year, because you might have got in, you start in one, you don't know if that's for you. If you're in biology and you still want to work in you listen to something I said, and you thought maybe physics or something was better, you could think about what you're good at, what your scores were like on the SAT in terms of quantitative, and whether you're better at something like biology or something like physics. If you're good at fractal math and geometry and things like that, then biology's good. Also, what is it that fractal geometry they use now in biology, and origami and stuff? As if you're into folding patterns and stuff and you're good at origami, I'm not that good at that, but I heard that there are a lot of applications in biology and chemistry for that. And if you're good at chemistry and biology, stick with it. That'd be my advice. I didn't mention chemistry, but there's a lot of people in chemistry and chemical engineering in the nuclear field, and there are a lot of national security concerns that are solved by people with chemistry backgrounds. And it doesn't matter if you want to work at DOE and the Department of Energy in some area, or you want to work for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, who's responsible for reducing some of those nuclear threats out there in the black market and rogue states like North Korea and Iran, or you want to work for a consulting firm, or you want to be on a submarine. Chemistry and chemical engineering is something we could use, and there's applications in supercomputing too for knowledge of chemistry. You work with computer scientists, physicists, math modelers, and apply your chemical knowledge to understand how to simulate different things, I guess. Chemical processes that are more complicated than 2 reagents and 1 product and a byproduct or something. Just chemical simulations that help people build reactors, right? About reactors, the Haber-Bosch reactors that created the nitrogen we needed to keep us from having a dust bowl. It was also created, what do you call it? In those reactions, they don't have stable equilibrium, right? You get these 2 reagents, and they react and create a product, but then it's not stable. It doesn't stay with that product that you need, and it goes back to the 2 reagents and go back and forth. You can never get the nitrogen out of there that you needed from the reaction. You can't build the stuff for the soil, right? And they weren't really trying to just build stuff for the soil. They was trying to make chemical weapons. And this German insecticide company is this Jewish guy. He was trying to create that stuff because he wanted to show that Jews could contribute to the war effort or something, or the technology needed to strengthen Germany. And this was before they went into where was it, in Krakow or whatever, and started waxing people and putting them on trains to Auschwitz and all those places. But he was working on insecticide. I think it was before that, and he come up with something for chemical weapons. And obviously, killing insects is kind of like what the effects of nerve gas are. But this create that Haber-Bosch process that that changes some of the physical properties of the reaction to remove the nitrogen once it gets over as a product, right? And they do that through heating and cooling, I guess, and pressure. And that's what a reactor is, right? It's some kind of, you create some kind of physical change to have the reaction take place. In nuclear reactors, you create fission, and then you take the fission. The fission is created by neutrons bombarding a fuel rod, and it divides the uranium, right? But you have to have a moderator like water to slow down the neutrons so it'll bond with the uranium to create 236. Then what does the 236 do? It splits because it's unstable, unlike the 235, which is stable. Then that creates 3 more neutrons and 2 radiation byproducts, which the 3 neutrons split some more radiation and kind of cascades and gets more and more splitting, which creates heat and energy that heats up the coolant so that that can create steam to create what? To create a pressure. To create pressure. Steam expands in the reactor to create pressure, which is like a generator, a turbine. It's a steam turbine, right? So that's how a nuclear reactor kind of works. And a generator is, you'll have to look that up. If you're an engineer, you'll definitely need to know. But generators is kind of like it's electromagnetism. And what it is, you've got magnets and you've got something that you spin with little windings on it, and the windings cut through the electrical field of the magnets, and the windings, it induces a current in the windings when those things spin by the magnets, right? And when it induces a current, that's the electricity you get from the thing spinning, right? That's how a generator works. It doesn't matter if it's diesel, gas, or nuclear, or steam pressure from the nuclear reactions, the fission. They all kind of work the same way, and that's sort of how it works. It spins and induces a current in those windings, and you can examine a good schematic diagram of of any kind of generator and understand that basically all the generators kind of work the same. The Army has generators, and they have generator mechanics that understand how it works, sort of. They have officers that understand how that works, and they also have, in the Navy, they have nuclear generators and nuclear power plants on reactors, on aircraft carriers and submarines, and that's how it works. And they say that a submarine could power a small city. And Fort Pierce is 250,000 people. If we really needed to, we'd probably pull a submarine in here, run a cable from it, and fire up the city if we lost our power out here. We use some of the power probably comes from the plant, but a lot of it they put on these big transmission lines and ship it around the country when people need a little electricity. All right. Well, that's enough for today.